There has never been a person as hated in the American industry as the man you're seeing on screen, our friend Carlos. Even though he's no longer the CEO of Stellantis, his legacy is still a hornet's nest of electric issues that many can't even bear to look at. This guy, with his futuristic vision, put Dodge and Ram into some sort of forced rehabilitation program. Less gas, more electricity. And of course, for fans of the roar of classic engines, that hit them like a bucket of cold water. First, he eliminated the essence of Dodge, with that electrification that, according to many, betrays the muscle car heritage. Now, as if that weren't enough, goodbye to the iconic V8S. From Ram, what's next for Stellantis? A Ram that runs on solar power and recites poetry when you start it up. Americans see this as a direct attack on their car culture, and they're not taking it well at all. But of course, furry friend, I know you're here for the 5th time and you're too embarrassed to subscribe. Come on, lose the embarrassment. It's not going to cost you anything since it's totally free. Thank you very much. Over the past few years, Carlos Tavares has been, by far, the strongman of Stellantis during his time as CEO of the company. Things have been done the way he wanted, even if those decisions went against what other bigwigs in the company, like Tim Kuniski, thought. The veteran FCA and later Stellantis executive has long been a defender of the group's legendary U8 Hemi engine, but not even his support prevented Tavares from killing the engine. In any case, Kuniski stepped down as Ram CEO and part of Stellantis in March 2024, making it even easier for Tavares to do away with the Hemi engine. However, now things have changed. Tavares resigned and stopped being the CEO of Stellantis. And just a few days later, Kuniski has returned to the company, even though he announced his retirement last March. The American executive is back as the CEO of Ram, a brand that's pretty much unknown in Europe. But it's crucial for Stellantis in its home market, the United States. So much so that part of Stellantis' poor results in the United States in 2024 are due to the drop in Ram sales. The fact that Ram has stopped selling its cars with the Hemi engine might explain, in part, the brand's poor results. But it's still too early to say for sure, as Kuniski explains in an interview with Road and Track. Honestly, the biggest problem isn't Hemi versus Kuniski. The biggest problem is that we've taken away a fundamental piece of American culture. Americans love the freedom of choice more than anything. When you take away their freedom of choice and tell them they have to have this, they rebel. Whether it makes sense or not, it doesn't matter. It's anti-American. Considering those statements, and Kuniski's long-standing passion for muscle cars in general, and the Hemi engine in particular, there's a chance that the CEO of Ram is thinking about bringing this engine back to his brand's lineup. Especially now that Ram has stopped making the TRX with the Hemi engine. They've launched a variant with a 6-cylinder engine, and they're about to release a fully electric pickup. Is thinking about bringing this engine back to his brand's lineup. Especially now that Ram has stopped making the TRX with the Hemi engine, they've launched a variant with a 6-cylinder engine and are about to release a fully electric pickup. I need to know why Ram sales are down before I say that the lack of the Hemi is the problem. But the question is whether it's really a problem or just noise because we stopped selling that engine. That's just how we are. They took away something I love. For now, he says that we can only wait. And in statements, he explains that it would be a challenge to fit the Hemi engine into the new Ram 1500. The Hemi was never designed to be mounted in this pickup with its new electric architecture. So that's a big challenge. He also explains that the Hemi production line is shut down. They shut down the production of that particular Hemi, the e-Torque. There's supplier work involved because when you shut something down, the suppliers close their assembly lines and move on to other things. That's why Kuniski makes it clear that if they were to bring back the Hemi, it wouldn't be something that happens right away. The engine design would need to be adapted to the new Ram that's set up for electrification, and the production line would have to be restarted, which involves a lot with suppliers. Even if I said to start making it again, we can't do it right away. I'm not saying we can't do it, but we can't do it right away. With Donald Trump, if climate rules change, car market shifts. If the new president follows through on his plan to loosen the climate regulations that Joe Biden put in place, or even completely reverse them, the rules of the game in the US automotive market would change drastically. And that means one thing, the glorious EMI T8 could rise from the dead. And that means one thing, the glorious EMI T8 could rise from the dead. Can you imagine? The iconic engine that defined an era of muscle cars roaring down the roads of the United States again. Trump already demonstrated during his previous term that he is not a fan of environmental restrictions. He even pulled the country out of the Paris Agreement in 2015, like canceling a streaming subscription. So it would not be unreasonable to think that, with a more relaxed political climate regarding emissions, Stellantis could reconsider its aggressive electric transition. This would give the Hemi V8 a new lease on life, especially at brands like Dodge and Ram, which have suffered something of an identity crisis. In trying to electrify, gasoline-addicted Americans would be celebrating with a beer in hand, while dealerships, now filled with electric cars that nobody wants, might start to see some action with classic engines that still have a loyal following. Yeah, these engines have a lot of history. The Hemi V8, born back in '59, it's not just an engine, it's a statement. Chrysler introduced it as the ultimate weapon to dominate the streets and the tracks. Why Hemi? Because it has hemispherical combustion chambers that allow for burning more air and fuel mixture, generating more power. In plain terms, more fire, more horsepower, more respect on the street. What's the result? This engine not only defined the American muscle car but also humbled more than one pretentious European in drag races. The Dodge Charger, and even the Plymouth Barracuda. They were the stars of the cinema, the circuits, and the traffic lights. Because, let's face it, nothing says I have class and testosterone like a V8 roaring as you leave everyone behind. Now, if the Hemi is the muscle, the Ford the Fifth 8 is the soul. In 1932, Henry Ford, a visionary, launched the first affordable V8, the Flathead. Not only did this revolutionize the automotive industry, it put powerful cars within reach of the average working man. Basically, thanks to Ford, the American dream had wheels and a roar worthy of the big screen. But that wasn't all. The Flathead became the heart of hot rods in the 40s and 50s. What's a hot rod? A work of art made of gasoline and speed, built in a garage, with love, beer, and a lot of recycled parts. This engine turned neighborhood kids into legends and created an entire subculture that still vibrates in the streets. These engines were more than pieces of engineering. They were symbols of freedom and rebellion. In a country where roads are endless and gasoline used to cost less than water, having a car with a powerful engine was having power. Whether it was on the racetracks, in the streets of Los Angeles, or on a back road in Texas, a V8 was your calling card. Plus, the Hemi and the Ford the Fifth 8 didn't just define cars. They defined people. They created an identity. I'm American, I love speed, and I don't care if the neighbor complains about the noise. Because nothing brings a country together like the roar of an engine that can wake up an entire neighborhood. That's why Stellantis isn't selling a damn thing in the United States today. But this isn't one of the reasons why dealerships aren't moving. How much does it cost to have a car just sitting there? What does it cost a dealership for a vehicle to just sit there collecting dust day after day? It will, obviously, depend on the cost of the vehicle, how urgent the company is to sell it, and above all, whether they expect to sell it someday. A dealership in the United States has given its own answer. Their space is worth the same as a whole electric Fiat 500. Dead stock. In logistics, dead stock is inventory not expected to sell. It ends up in warehouses due to overconfidence, poor demand analysis, defects, or lack of market success. This product not only fails to generate profits, but also incurs losses. In a warehouse, space is money, and unsellable products occupy space that could be used for profitable items, adding to fixed costs. The problem is that this product not only doesn't generate profits, it's actually causing losses for the company. In a warehouse, space is money, and having a product that is not going to be sold means that space is being taken away from another product that is expected to generate profits, and it also continues to add to the fixed costs of a warehouse. Look, I might as well just give it away. At that point, the best thing to do is to get rid of the product as best as you can. And if it means giving it away, then so be it. That's what a dealership in Denver, Colorado, selling Dodge, Ram, and Fiat cars has decided to do. Electric Fiat 500s lease $0 per month, 27 months, taxes up front, 16,100 kilometers max. The outlet claims that the seller is putting this electric car in the hands of the customer for $0 a month for 27 months. As long as they cover the taxes associated with the transaction. The leasing contract is limited to a maximum of 16,100 kilometers, and the taxes need to be paid in one lump sum. The offer, as the outlet explains, has had an immediate draw. The outlet has confirmed with a local testimony that the offer is as good as it's stated in the ads. The story that the Autopian tells is just the tip of the iceberg of the problem Stellantis is facing in the United States. A problem that, in fact, has resulted in Carlos Tavares leaving the company after a resignation that seems to have been forced. The Portuguese implemented a strict cost-cutting plan that has defined his leadership of the conglomerate. He made companies clarify sales outlooks, but Tavares persisted. He continued sending cars to America, though they gathered dust. Sending cars to America, even though they were just piling up more and more dust. The company had gone from enviable operating margins of over 12% in 2023 to just 5.5% in 2024. This led them to confirm that they would reduce their production by 200,000 vehicles, in addition to an emissions regulation in 2025 for Europe. which will require a reduction in sales of cars with combustion engines. In the United States, they had tens of thousands of unsold vehicles. To give you an idea, they say it takes an average of 617 days to sell in the United States. In light of these sales forecasts, Stellantis dealerships had risen up in arms. The National Council of Stellantis Dealers in the United States sent an open letter to Carlos Tavares accusing him of causing a disaster. Between January and June of 2024, Ram sales dropped by 26%, Dodge sales dropped by 16%, Chrysler by 9%. And all of this was a result of ridiculously high prices for luxury cars, with the claim that the whole problem boiled down to the price and the level of the product. But the biggest problem with dead stock is what Stellantis was facing. If the car doesn't get sold, it loses value and keeps racking up costs for the company, but also, it falls behind against the competition that's flooding the market with more attractive alternatives than what the conglomerate had sitting in their warehouses. So, it's basically a cyst that's just getting bigger and bigger. In the case of Stellantis, its size reached years. As we mentioned, on average, an Alfa Romeo Giulia that arrives in the United States takes over a year to sell. But as Carlos pointed out, this wasn't an isolated case. To sell an Alfa Romeo, Stellantis needed 456 days. And to sell the Fiat 500e, it took 454 days. The case of the Fiat 500e is particularly painful for the company. Electric car sales in the United States are still low. To show the data from January to September of 2024, at the end of this third quarter, electric cars have set a new record, but they still only account for 8.9% of total sales. In Germany, where subsidies for this technology have been withdrawn and they're experiencing a significant drop, they hold a market share of 13.4%. Tesla's standard adopted sparse network. Long distances need long-range cars. In fact, its sparse density has forced manufacturers to adopt Tesla's standard to make their cars more appealing. With few charging stations and huge distances, we need cars that can guarantee hundreds of kilometers of range between stops. It's the complete opposite of what the Fiat 500c offers. Carlos Tavares is essential in automotive talks. He was direct, pressuring to maximize profits. This former CEO of Stellantis didn't beat around the bush. He said what he thought and didn't hesitate to put the pressure on governments, unions, and even his own employees if it meant squeezing every penny out of his brands. Delicate. Not even joking. This guy was more straightforward than a Dodge Charger on a straightaway. He adopted Carlos Ghosn's methods. Ghosn, the cost killer, cut costs to boost profits. Tavares followed suit, slashing costs with zeal. Ghosn was known as the cost killer because he had a habit of cutting back even on air conditioning to boost profits. Well, Tavares took notes and followed the playbook to the letter, because if there was one thing he loved, it was slashing costs like his life depended on it. In his younger years, Tavares was the number 2 at Renault and chief operating officer. But in 2014, he made the leap to the PSA group, just when the French were on the brink of collapse and needed a lifeline. Spoiler alert, the French government had to buy 14% of PSA to bail it out. Tavares steps in and the guy didn't waste any time. First, he got Citroën and Peugeot in line. Then, in 2017, he went on a shopping spree, stealing Opel from General Motors, as if it were Black Friday. As if that wasn't enough, he revamped the PSA lineup, creating DS automobiles to compete in the premium segment, separating it from Citroën like a kid wanting independence. This is where Carlos Tavares' legend turns brutal. He swiftly turned Opel profitable, like magic. The guy came into the PSA group and in the blink of an eye, he turned Opel back to profitability like it was magic. In just 1 year, Opel went from being the troublemaker of the PSA family to raking in cash. By 2015, PSA was already flying high, with 1.202 billion euros in profits and a cash flow of 3.8 billion. You can bet this guy doesn't know how to lose. With these numbers, Tavares was the brains behind one of the most significant mergers in automotive history. PSA and FCA joined forces and brought Stellantis to life in 2021. Suddenly, the guy was in charge of an automotive monster with a lineup of brands that looks like a festival of legendary names: Abarth, Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Citroën, Dodge, DS, Fiat, Jeep, Lancia, Maserati, Opel, Peugeot, Vauxhall, and, more recently, Leap Motor to conquer the Chinese electric vehicle market. In Europe, Stellantis was so big that in some countries it captured over 40% of the market, more dominance than a team that always wins the Super Bowl. But Tavares isn't the type to just let things flow on their own. He made it clear to executives that there would be no room for sentimentality. If a brand wasn't showing positive numbers, it was going in the trash. His strategy was simple and brutal: cut what was not useful and focus on economies of scale, all under one mantra. Cars have to make money before we worry about the critics. What if all the Stellantis models start to look alike? Well, as long as the numbers add up, Tavares cares little if purists cry. One of his master moves was betting on multi-energy platforms, cars that can run on gasoline, hybrids, plug-ins, or electric. This gave Stellantis a cushion of time while the transition to electric vehicles solidifies. Tavares even took the opportunity to throw a direct jab at Volkswagen, which decided to dive headfirst into electric vehicles. Basically, he told them, "Relax, I'm playing with the whole board while you put all your eggs in one basket." And the numbers? Spectacular. Basically, he told them, "Relax, I'll play with the whole board while you put all your eggs in one basket." And the numbers? Spectacular. In 2023, Stellantis reported a profit of 18.625 billion euros, an 11% increase from 2022. Yeah, their operating margin dipped slightly from 13.4% to 12.0%. But who's gonna complain with those profits? It's more money than most brands can dream of in decades. Carlos Tavares, Stellantis' unstoppable cost killer, has fallen. And although it seemed that nothing could knock it down, the numbers and the controversies caught up with it like a muscle car on the open road. The Portuguese, who had vowed to stay until 2026, ended up resigning under pressure from a board that no longer wanted his inflexible decisions, according to Bloomberg. Because yes, the brilliant results had a trick and the house of cards collapsed. In September, Stellantis announced it would cut production by 200,000 vehicles. Things were going south. The glorious double-digit operating margin was now threatening to plummet to 5.5%, a level that stops being impressive for a company of its size. The glorious double-digit operating margin was now threatening to plummet to 5.5%, a level that stops being impressive for a company of its size. The reason? An absurdly high stock in the United States. The brands ended up devalued, prices dropped, and Tavares, instead of listening to the executives who were asking to slow down, decided to hit the gas and keep production up. As a result, dealerships were filled with cars that nobody wanted. Stellantis crisis. Tavares slams EU's electric car plan, cuts jobs. On the one hand, Tavares did not stop criticizing Europe for its commitment to electric cars, blaming them for opening the doors to China and scoring an industrial own goal. On the other hand, he made enemies by laying off employees left and right, both in America and Europe. Governments like those of Canada and Italy came down hard on him for his cuts and decisions that, according to them, prioritized quick profits over jobs and stability. And wait, because if that wasn't enough, the PureTech engine scandal hit. It turns out that a WEC defective belt has caused thousands of engines to blow up like birthday balloons, leaving customers with repair bills that look like mortgages. Stellantis' solution, a retroactive warranty extension of up to 10 years. But for many, the damage was already done. Complaints skyrocketed and trust in the brand hit rock bottom. Even though Carlos Tavares' final year has been more eventful than a Friday on the road, all is not lost for Stellantis. Despite the shadows that have clouded its exit, the automotive conglomerate still has a few tricks up its sleeve. For sure, whoever comes in to replace him is going to have more work than a mechanic on Black Friday. To begin with, the new CEO will inherit a giant that operates with a clear recipe, cost control taken to the extreme. Tavares made sure to tighten every financial screw to keep the margins high, even if it meant alienating employees, governments, and even customers. The result? An efficient business, but with open reputational wounds, especially in the United States. The new head of Stellantis will not only have to deal with the inventory disaster and the reputation issues in the United States, but also with the mother of all nightmares in Europe, the CAFE regulations. These rules that go into effect next year threaten million-dollar fines for any manufacturer that fails to keep their emissions under control. But, surprisingly, Carlos Tavares always seemed optimistic, defending that the limits already set were manageable. Unlike other CEOs who whine with every new rule, Tavares would say, "Don't worry, we've got this under control." How true is that? Well, we'll see. On the other hand, small and less profitable cars also need to start making money. How? Using the magic formula that Stellantis has perfected. Shared platforms, cuts wherever possible, and offering versions for every taste: combustion, hybrid, plug-in, electric, and if they could, even pedal-powered. Basically, turning every model into a chameleon so they don't stop selling in any market. The elephant in the room, however, is the brand portfolio. Basically, turning each model into a chameleon so that it doesn't stop selling in any market. The elephant in the room, however, is the brand portfolio. All the rumors point to this launch of possibly starting to juggle some of its less shiny gems. Maserati, Chrysler, Dodge, Lancia, and DS automobiles are on the ropes because, frankly, they are not contributing much to the group's pocket. Maserati looks like the wannabe Ferrari that never takes off. Chrysler seems to be living off memories. Dodge has the muscle cars and intensive care. And Lancia? Well, Lancia is a ghost that still insists on existing. And Lancia, well, Lancia is a ghost that still insists on existing. So will this be the year that Stellantis gets rid of the brands that aren't measuring up? Be careful, because this would not only be an economic move, it would also affect the identity of the conglomerate. Saying goodbye to Dodge or Chrysler, for example, would be like cutting a beloved branch off the American automotive tree. 2025 is shaping up to be a pivotal year. Between meeting emissions targets in Europe, trying to make smaller cars profitable, and deciding whether or not to sell part of its history, Stellantis is playing a financial game where any move could topple the tower. What's clear is that the new leader will need nerves of steel and a clear vision to stay on course.